It's time to join Montana's very own and your voice for agriculture, Talkin' Ag Lane Nordlund, for today's Lancast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lancast Ag Podcast, and we are outside of the normal podcast studio here today. We're actually out in Washington, D.C., participating in the National Potato Council's Washington Summit. Advocacy taking place this week with farmers up on Capitol Hill, along with the National Potato Council's annual meeting taking place. And if you don't know it, I'm also the host of the National Potato Council's I Am Potatoes podcast. So yes, a guy that runs cows hosts a potato podcast.
Meat and potatoes?
Meat and potatoes, yeah, it goes well together. And joining us here today, after my long introduction of myself, is an individual I've got to work with through the I Am Potatoes podcast, and that's Mr. Matt Lantz with Bryant, Christie, based out of Portland, Oregon.
Seattle.
Oh, geez, yeah. See, that's why you're the expert, and I'm just the BSer here. But Matt, your career has focused on creating trading opportunities for farmers. Right. Mm-hmm. You and I have talked quite a bit about, obviously, opportunities for U.S. potato exports, but Bryant Christie really works on so many different commodities and trading opportunities and creating export value for your customers as well. And we're kind of in a unique situation right now. There's a new administration. Obviously, the talk of trade, tariffs is top of mind. A little bit of just uncertainty, I guess, is the term we need to use right now between farmers that are attending the event here, farmers and packers, shippers, whatever it might be, and also the members up on Capitol Hill. It's a busy week here in D.C. While we're doing this, I know a funding bill is currently being debated. But from your perspective at Bryant Christie, what is the feeling out there from some of our international trade partners right now? Whether you agree or disagree with the talk of tariffs, what is the feeling out there?
The feeling is transition. We're in a whole new world. And the old order, where I started 25 years ago, where there's a World Trade Organization and there was most favored nation, and there were back then it was all global. We're all going to work together and try to lift all boats. And then it became more, let's do individual free trade agreements with individual countries, Korea, you name it, Australia. And now we're in a new world. It is a new world on trade with the Trump administration. And a large part of that is because of the use of tariffs, or the potential use of tariffs. And everyone's preparing for that. And there are upsides to that, and there are potential downsides to that. So it's not a black or white. They can be helpful. They can cause a lot of damage as well. So we'll see. And we're all kind of in a wait and see. I think we're all trying to not overreact to statements that are being made, and really watching to see what is actually implemented, because that is where the rubber will meet the road.
Now, I know you've worked so long with the National Potato Council and other stakeholders, especially to open the fresh access of U.S. fresh potatoes to Mexico. Almost 30 years of work went into that. A lot of politics, of course, coming out of Mexico on that as well. Their industry not wanting to allow that, even though there was trade agreements in place. So obviously we could go on and with that. But that's a concern, obviously, is it is a delicate situation there. And so how does this, a bit of a pause in the implementation of those tariffs with Mexico and Canada right now as the three nations discuss the possibility there, what is this limbo like when you're maybe communicating with some of your partners down in Mexico that have helped pave the way in opening that access?
Well, I think we're taking a wait and see attitude. We ship potatoes to Mexico every day, and we want to continue to do that. And until there are any bumps in the road, every day we're in there, I said this in Orlando when we were speaking, we are more consolidated. There are more people eating U.S. potatoes. There are more businesses buying U.S. potatoes, and we want to keep that going. Now, if there are tariffs, if there are new tariffs that come into effect against Mexico and they decide to retaliate, then we have to see if we're on a list, and then that will be a new world. So we're all watching, and hopefully that will not occur in that particular situation, but we are aware.
So a big topic right now, too, has been India I know Prime Minister Modi was just over here in Washington, D.C. on the Western Ag Network. I covered it, and as President Trump said, right now the U.S. is in a reciprocal mode when it comes to trade. And obviously I was focused on my storytelling with the opportunity for pulse crops, peas, chickpeas, lentils, and whatnot. Are you or your colleagues maybe focused in following that situation and just how detrimental India's policies have been to U.S. agriculture? I think it was like some $174 million of U.S. pulses went over to India in 2014, and $1 million of pulses went in 2023. So obviously, having fair trade is so important. I guess has Bryant Christie been following that closely, or is that a different area?
Different clients have different priorities. So India is a priority for the berry industries. Okay. And so they are very interested in growing the Indian market. There's interest, for example, from the cranberry industry of growing that. Another industry, the hop industry, is very interested in exporting additional hops into India. So there's definitely interest in India, but it's largely we'd like to grow this potential market, and there's interest from within India to those two crops in particular, which are the ones I'm familiar with. Mm-hmm. I am aware of other industries that at one time shipped a lot of product into India and then had a situation as you described with pulse. But since I don't work for those industries, I don't want to say anything about that.
No worries.
But yeah, I mean, India is an example where they have high tariffs on agriculture, and so that's an area where possibly figuring a way to get those tariffs down would really benefit American exports. So we'll see.
So what are some areas that maybe the mainstream media isn't focused on right now in terms of trade opportunities or areas of growth for whether it's potatoes or some of your other clients, and looking at getting more, utilizing these conversations? Because I should highlight too, there was a lot of frustration from the ag community during the Biden administration for the lack of initiative on new trade agreements, right, or fostering those relationships. I guess what are some areas that maybe we haven't focused on very much?
Well, it's obviously this administration and the president are very transactional. And so, we talk a lot about Mexico, but we also opened the Chinese market after 20 years because of an agreement between the U.S. and the Chinese government at the time, back in the first Trump administration. So if you have a long-standing trade issue that just is not going anywhere, now's the time to talk about it. Make a submission into the government and say this is something that's just been sitting there for a long time, and maybe as there's these new discussions in all sorts of new areas, there might be an opportunity to jar that loose.
Well, again, wait and see. It's tough to do.
Yeah, definitely.
But hey, Matt, I know it's a busy day here in D.C. for the Washington Summit, but just any last thoughts on the trade front and anything you'd like to share with our viewers and listeners today?
What is that line about being, may you live in interesting times? Yeah, we're living in interesting times, and there's definitely a feel that where we will be 2 years from now is going to be very different than where we are right now. And we'll see what that world is. And our job as trade consultants and the job of the National Potato Council and other groups is to navigate these choppy waters and look for great opportunities for us.
We'll get Matt Lantz with Bryant Christie out of Seattle. Sorry, I said Portland.
That's right.
Yeah, I'll have to buy you a drink here tonight. But thank you so much for joining us here today. And again, for our friends joining us, a quick conversation. Obviously, trade is top priority for so many in agriculture, and for more of our conversations that I've had with Matt on issues like fresh access to Mexico and the work that they're doing to get in Japan. I host the other podcast, the Eye on Potatoes podcast for the National Potato Council. I'd encourage you to go check that out as well. Hours of conversations, very enlightening. Even if you're not in the potato industry, it's just can give you a different insight on a different aspect of agriculture that is going through maybe a similar battle that your commodity or maybe livestock that you raise as well. So Matt, thanks for joining us here today.
Happy to be here, Lane.
With that, friends, thanks for joining us here on the Lancast Ag Podcast. We'll continue to have more conversations from here in DC throughout the week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Lanecast with Talkin' Ag, Lane Nordlund. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lanecast on your Apple or Android devices, We look forward to joining you next time on the Lanecast.